Hello, hello. This is Dahlia,
And I'm Allie.
and welcome to Navigate the Now, Season 2.
Season 2. Welcome. Exciting episode. On this episode, we have Beth Macy. Beth is a journalist and author of multiple New York Times best-selling books, including the very popular title Dope Sick, which details the opioid crisis and its effects on Appalachia, and was turned into a TV series. And she is now coming out with Paper Girl, a memoir which explores the political divide and its consequences in her hometown, just up the road from me, in Urbana, Ohio. And we wanted to take a quick moment to give a special shout out to Vicki Forrest for connecting us with Beth. Vicki has been a local journalist here in Springfield, Ohio for years, and even reported on a lot of the very recent tense events here in Springfield during the last election cycle. Vicki is also the mother to a longtime friend, Ben.
Hi,
Hey,
Ben.
Ben. Ben's a loyal Navigate the Now listener and good friend. We see you and
We
thank you.
appreciate you.
Yeah. And I reference Vicki throughout the episode. And just wanted to mention that Vicki and Beth were collaborating on the dying local news and how it has affected communities that rely heavily now on social media for their news or national news instead of local news, and without really any scope or knowledge of what's going on in our own communities, which contributes directly to a lot of what Beth's going to talk about in the episode. So shout out to Vicki as well. We appreciate you, and we
Appreciate
hope you enjoy.
Vicky. Enjoy the episode.
Enjoy. I'm Allie,
Hello, and I'm Dahlia.
and welcome to Navigate the Now. Today we have an extra special guest, someone from my homeland of Ohio, Beth Macy. Welcome, Beth Macy.
Thank you. It's
Yay.
great to be here with you guys.
Oh, man,
Yes.
it's an honor to have you on.
Yes, it really is. One of the most exciting things I've ever done. So thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. And just real quick, we'll give a little bit of background. Beth Macy is a Virginia-based journalist who writes about outsiders and underdogs. Raised poor in a small Ohio community, she is the award-winning author of 3 New York Times best-selling books examining rural communities left behind by corporate greed and political indifference. Dope Sick, Factory Man, Raising Lazarus, True Vine, and now Paper Girl, a memoir of home and family in a fractured America.
Welcome
So-
again, Beth. I mean,
Yes.
3 New York Times best-selling. How does that ever get old to you, or you're just
Never,
like, okay?
never. No, and don't take it for granted. I'm
Oh,
praying
that's
that this
awesome.
one makes
That's
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, with all our guests, we share our community agreements, right? So the idea behind community agreements is how we are going to show up in this space right now with one another. Yeah? So I'm going to read them off. And at the end, you let me know if you agree with them. And also, feel free to share any additional community agreements that you'd like to add.
Okay.
So we'll get started. Community agreement number 1, speaking in draft. Meaning there's no complete thought, right? We can say something, can go back, we can change it. We're not held to it. It's not stuck in stone, written in stone, yeah? Community agreement number 2, assume we're all doing our best here. Number 3, not here to be right, but to get it right. Got that from Brene Brown. Number 4, practice active listening to understand versus solely to respond.
That's for me.
Number 5, be mindful of speaking space, how much time we're taking up. Allie likes to point out all the time, that's really for us. It's not for you. You speak as long as you want.
Yeah, that's for us.
And number 6, our time together is a space to learn and grow. Number 7, listen to understand. Oh my God, I think there's on there twice.
Yeah.
I guess
that's
we're
okay.
going to highlight that even more. Listen to understand
Yes.
versus listen to respond. And then number 8, we're here to have a good time, here to have fun. So
Yes.
Beth, do you agree with these?
Yes, sounds great.
Nice.
Anything that
Nice.
you'd like to add?
No, I feel I'm in good hands.
All right.
Nice. All right. Cool.
You know, we know that you are a New York Times bestseller, taking your time to spend with us on our podcast here. And I really want to take it back a bit. I know that the Paper Girl is a memoir, right? It's about your life. And I want to open the space for us, so for you to kind of start wherever you'd like. If it's childhood, if it's young adulthood, where would you like to start? How Beth Macy kind of started, and how you kind of came to be where you're at right now.
Sure.
Broad question. Take it however, whatever angle you'd like to take it.
So I grew up the road from Alley in Urbana, Ohio, a small town that born in 1964 and born to a pretty poor family. I had a father that suffered from addiction and a mom who sort of held the family together. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. It's always one of the first things I say about myself because it has informed all of my writing, my whole career. And, as I report out in the book Paper Girl, my memoir, which is also heavily reported, like, had I been born 10 years later, it would have been impossible for me to go because I really needed that full Pell Grant to cover all of my tuition and costs, and it did. But that's no longer the case because going back to the Reagan administration and many administrations that followed in both parties, we've basically taken the ability for a promising poor kid to go to a 4-year school away because now it would only cover about 30%. And so, I'm often in my upper middle class world that I'm in now, the bubble, we all live in a bubble. I'm often the only person that grew up poor because it's gotten so much harder for people to get out of it. And that was one of the big takeaways from going back to Urbana for this book over the last 2 years was it is so much harder for a kid as poor as I was to get out of that situation now.
Absolutely.
I know that it was an opening night where it was in Urbana that you had, the words are leaving my mind right now, but you spoke about your book.
Yeah,
And
book launch, yeah.
The book launch. There you go. Okay, yeah, the book launch. And you had quite a few people show up. I read on my words keep leaving, but
Instagram,
I think it was
or something.
Instagram, but your
Substack.
Substack, yes, that it's like, yes, you can return home. And then you mentioned about how so many people showed up. How was it to have that homecoming and to have people show up and kind of support in that way on a book that is so near and dear to you?
Yeah, well, it was fantastic. Of course, this was 2 days before the book came out, so not very many people in the room had the chance to read it. Some of my relatives had read it, or at least their parts in it, and with mixed reactions. And it was so great to just be introduced and go up on a stage, and they had what's it called when you come out to music? They had Brown Eyed Girl, brown eyes, and
Yeah.
and just to see hundreds of people. And I said it's kind of like getting to go to your own funeral with the benefit of added benefit of not having to die first. And I also always say when I go to Urbana, because I was kind of a wild child, that y'all are just here to make sure I'm really not in jail now.
So, some people are wondering how did Beth Macy not get in jail? Was there any time that you almost went to jail? You want to share those stories at all?
Some of them are in the book. I mean, I had a lot of near misses. Yeah.
One of the questions that I have is tell us about what ultimately inspired you to create Paper Girl. You've had Dope Sick, I know it's a really popular book turned into a series. What was it, the turning point, and what did you decide, okay, well, I'm now going to focus about me and writing about my experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had known for many years that college was out of reach, partly because I taught at a community college when my kids were little, and I could just see that this idea of helping people out of poverty through the notion of higher ed was just there was a lot of discrimination against kids who got Pell Grants, even in the 90s, and I hadn't seen that myself. And so that was kind of surprising, and I wrote a little bit about it. I actually gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to Senator Pell, and my remark, I didn't even know there was a person named Senator Pell, and I wrote 4 or 5 articles in the late 90s that, hey guys, we're doing this, trying to ring the alarm that this is not good. especially at a time when we're supposed to be, moving into the knowledge economy. And then in 2020, my mother was dying, and it happened to be the week of the 2020 election. And on that Saturday after the election, they were still recounting the votes in Georgia. And my evangelical sister was in my mom's memory care room with the hospice nurse and me. And when the hospice nurse announced that they were calling the election for Biden, my sister got really upset and shouted, "You wait, it's fraudulent. He won't win."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's what I said. And I, she had never really talked about politics in front of me, and certainly at not such a painful moment. Our mom literally is trying to catch her last breath. And so I wrote a piece for the New York Times about it, about like what would be left with my family now with my mom gone. She was always the glue. And just starting to write about polarization was my first kind of tiptoe into that topic. And so this piece ran in the New York Times right before Christmas. They only left it open for comments for about an hour, and there were hundreds of comments. So I realized I wasn't alone. I started researching that, and I saw that 1 in 5 Americans is now estranged from their families because of politics. And so I knew I was kind of on to something. 1 in 5. Just last week, a poll in the New York Times and Siena poll showed that polarization is most Americans' number one issue. They say that's why we can't get any of our problems solved, and it's a bigger problem even than the economy. So I think the book just keeps getting more relevant. But so after the Times piece, after my brother unfriended me on Facebook during Trump's first administration because of, quote, all the liberal shit I post. And, I had a brother-in-law who I'd say, "Hey, John, how you doing?" He'd go, "Deplorable," and just, try to goad me into an argument. Then I decided to write this proposal, and it took me a couple of times to get it right, but it felt like a really trenchant way to tell the story. It was not to just me tell my journey of getting out of poverty, but to go back and say, how much harder is it for a young me now? So that's what I did.
I mean, it is super relevant, and I think it will probably continue to stay relevant for as long as we can figure out how to really be in community with others that don't necessarily have our same political views. So now that, you said this was in 2020 that you wrote the article, right, where it was your sister. How is it now? How have you been able to navigate those relationships?
Yeah, that's basically how the book came together. So I spent call it a third of the time following this young me, who was a young man named Silas James, who was also the leader of the band. I was the leader of the band, but he was homeless during his junior and senior years, and he had been, his parents were in and out of prison. His father died of overdose, and yet he was the drum major of the band, and was able to get a community college scholarship, but it only paid for certain things, and it certainly didn't cover his 2-hour commute that he had every day. And so just to see him bump against all these problems of not having enough social supports, I thought was really eye-opening. A third of the story is, my efforts to come to grips with what happened in my family and sort of my own family divisions. And then the other third was more about others in the community. And one of the takeaways was, because at the beginning, because again, I live in a blue bubble, like both of you, I was surprised that there were more, that a lot of the people I interviewed in Urbana, including civic leaders, were way to the right of my siblings even, and more conspiratorial. So I started bumping up against QAnon and things like Sovereign Citizens, and an ex-boyfriend from Springfield who emerges right before my eyes as the leader of this anti-Haitian immigrant group right as that story was blowing up,
Oh, wow.
leading up into the 2024 election. And to see him go from like Bernie supporter, one of the most liberal people I ever knew, to, you know, to the right of QAnon practically, and getting most of his news from Russian propaganda websites was really something to behold.
So, Vicky and I talked a lot about this. She actually, when we sat down, she called and kind of let us know what your book was about. And I was actually visiting Dahlia in New York, so we talked to her together. And she told me that story about the ex-boyfriend. And I thought, wow, I think I know exactly who she's talking about, because I'd seen him all over the news. And you were right. And when you explained it more on Sunday, you know, I kind of started to think, oh, was this kind of like the catalyst of, I didn't know he had been on all these national syndicates, because Springfield had, you know, this past year in Springfield, it was really hard and it got really crazy.
Hard. I mean, Vicky was filling me in as I was reporting, and she was like, you wouldn't believe it, what's happening here. Everybody was so afraid, bomb threats and KKK rallies.
The issues like just expanded out in these onion layers, right? First, it's like this Haitian issue, and then that drew national attention. And I couldn't even go to the gas station. You know, there's a New Sheets gas station down the road without being accosted by people telling me to keep my cats inside, you know, because, yeah, it was really bizarre. And I help with cat rescue here. So, and where... And I remember I got really irritated, and I was like, well, unfortunately, people don't really actually care about the fucking cats here, you know? So anyways, it felt so heated. It felt like we were in a pressure cooker. And I know. And I felt like, what did I do coming back here? Like, you know, like, what was I thinking? You know, what the hell was I thinking? And so I realized this had been going on since before I came. And then it turned into bomb threats, like you said. And then, you know, everybody's putting their opinions out there about it all over social media. You're just seeing people you grew up with saying things that you can't imagine that they'd ever say. And, you know, it makes you sick to your stomach. And I've been getting really emotional reading your book, because I texted Vicky the other day. I said, I feel like this is really putting into words for a lot of feelings that I've had that are kind of indescribable. Mm-hmm. So, this is really powerful.
Well, it got really personal with Bill at one point. It was a year ago in the summer, and I was setting up an appointment because I told him at the beginning I'd fact check, because we'd had probably 10 hours of interview notes and lots of email back and forth. And there were some of his criticisms of the Democrats. I totally said, yeah, that great point.
Sure.
The Iraq War was a disaster. The NAFTA and joining the WTO for China was a disaster, and we didn't do anything left for the people left behind. And I was trying to get that point across to him. And as I was setting up this meeting to fact check with him, and he just totally lost his mind and started shouting at me on email and calling me bad names and like effing liar and blah, 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 and just assuming nothing but the very worst about me. And it felt dangerous. And at the same time, people in Springfield were saying that he was becoming sort of menacing and showing up at these meetings and causing scenes and being really, really rude to the mayor in public meetings, and it was suggested that it wasn't safe to spend time with him. So I just kind of cut things off. Mm-hmm. And of course, in February, it may have been our mutual friend Vicky who told me that he had died. He had died in February of a case of pneumonia. And I went back to my notes, and like the first time I interviewed him, he said, yeah, Obamacare was such a scam on the middle class. I'll never participate in that. I don't have health insurance. And if something gets me and I'm 75, okay, no, well, it'll be my time to go, kind of thing. Like, he didn't want to participate in this system. And so basically he got pneumonia and waited too long to go to the hospital, even though he could have self-paid. His daughter told me later he had the money to have self-paid, but he went late, and he died at age 63. And as his daughter described, his entree into these rabbit holes of despair and paranoia. And he himself had told me how his friends had sort of turned against him when he wasn't going to vote for Hillary. And even the deacon in his church, they were really angry at him. And I think he felt, sort of picked on, and they all broke up, including lifelong friends and old roommates and people I had kept in touch with. And I think he felt all alone, and he found community on the internet. And as his daughter would now tell you, the internet killed my dad.
Wow. So she'll make that claim that the internet killed her dad.
She said that when I talked to her about a month or two after he passed. It's not in the book because the book was finished, but I wanted to confirm like the details about his last illness and what had happened. And they weren't really speaking at the time because of what we're all talking about right now.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, a really common story. And I think so many of us have had those falling outs. I have as well. So,
yeah,
not maybe my own specific family, but friends. Sorry, go ahead.
How have you handled it, Allie?
It really got me thinking about that when I was sitting at your talk. So many things I was thinking. When Trump was elected the first time, I flipped. And I'm pretty sure I posted on Facebook, this is the essence of my whole life and what I do. I teach a foreign language, embracing the other. And so like, this just was nothing I stood for with anything in my life in my role in education. And at the end I said, and I know I have family that voted for this man. And it started kind of like a fight. I had a cousin comment on it that I think she thought I was talking about her. And maybe I was, but it wasn't specifically about her. So we got in a huge fight publicly. On Facebook. And then that kind of sat for years. And just with her specifically, I think she kind of came around because during COVID, I think, she was like, what the hell is going on? And she and I talked a lot. And so that kind of worked itself out because I feel like I don't want to say she's come to my side because I don't know if she has, but another friend was really pushing the narrative that the election was stolen, and I got really irritated with her as well. The thing is, they share these things on the internet, and I'm thinking, you're espousing this and getting people angry. And I said verbatim, you're going to cause, we're pushing something over the edge, so it's, then you think of January 6th. And she deleted social media after we got in this horrid fight, and we didn't talk for a couple years. And then I moved home and we started talking again. We haven't really like addressed that, but when you said you and your brother just started talking again and being together, I feel like that's what we did.
Yeah.
And so now
it's like one step at a time. Who are you as human beings together? Because we're not just our politics, right? And so after my brother unfriended me on Facebook, missed our kids' play, and he said it was because of all the liberal shit you post. And then I wanted to invite him. We have bought this cabin on a creek, and he's a great fisherman, and I wanted him to see it. And so he and his wife came to visit, and our son had not long before come out as non-binary, and they're a musician. They're kind of on the rise. They're doing really well in this band called Palmyra. And Tim was interested in checking the band out, and it turned out he loved the music. And then at one point he said, because he didn't know any non-binary people, and so he said it in such a curious tone, not judgment or not mean. He said, well, tell me, does he still date girls? And I said, yes, they're dating a young woman now, and I mess up the pronouns too. And I think because I had done all this research on how to have these conversations across the divide, I was able to recognize more quickly than I would have been before that you have to pause and try to find the grace in where each other's coming from. Like, my sister Cookie probably never knew a gay person, right? But now she doesn't want to because she's just so convinced from her the brainwashing she's had within her evangelical church that that's just wrong, untouchable, abomination, right? So I'm not going to get anywhere with her, but I can still love her and support her in other ways. When we try to talk about it, it just went south in about 2 seconds. And then later it occurred to me, well, that's why Max would never go home to see Grandma in the last 5 years of her life, because he was afraid Cookie was going to say something rude to him. And then that gets me mad, and it's like I did the best I could with what I knew at the time, but I wish I would have pushed that a little bit more.
Yeah.
You wish you would have pushed it a little bit more was it with your sister or with who?
Well, with Max, just like going to see Grandma, that kind of thing.
Got it.
Didn't know that would be the last time he would see his grandma was when he was 20,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's a weird dance. And that's, so when you asked me that, I'm like, before I think I'd get really hot about it. And in the past, I've been more, screw these people, or I can't find common ground. So I have to just let it go. And then I've come back to, nothing's going to change if I don't talk to this person. Right.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not going to get better if I don't talk to them. Mm-hmm. So, I think some people, when I've brought back people into my life back, I think some other people have said to me, oh, you're going to talk to this person, or, and I'm like, yeah, nothing's going to change if I don't talk to them. So, which has kind of been my motto. And it's really hard though, is what I was going to say.
Yeah. And especially when you're so fearful for immigrants. I mean, you, I'm sure, have taught immigrants, and I'm fearful for my trans child and my gay son and his husband, and it's just a whole another level of complication. But a friend of mine pointed out, that before gay marriage was legalized, it took people starting to know people. Right? And that sort of changed the Overton window of what's acceptable, right? And so we saw that, I think that was 2014. And that was pretty fast, given how much support there wasn't for it before that. It was relatively fast. And then this data showing that we're going to be a majority-minority country by, I think it's 2042. As somebody in the book, Steve Levitsky at Harvard points out, we have never seen this much societal change in the history of the world this fast. And so then the question is, so is all that we're going through now growing pains related to just these demographic shifts, or are we on the verge of a civil war? And when I ask famous political science that question, she goes, I ask myself that every day. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I do think we've endured almost like hyper growth in so many areas. And I ask myself that too. Is it just too fast for humanity to comprehend, logically as a whole? And so now it's like this pendulum. I don't know.
No, and the right has made it such a boogeyman to be a trans person, like less than 2% of the population. Or you see them even doing it with the budget now. They're lying and saying that all the illegal immigrants have health care, and that's why they don't want to fix, the health care. I mean, that's such a lie. They don't have health care. It's just such an easy cudgel to use.
Yeah. That's part of the reason why Allie and I even started this podcast this year, was we were just, trying to figure out what we can do, and having these conversations I think are super valuable. There's a lot of trends that we've noticed in the different guests that we've had, and like we even have to do our own research. And for me, when the question is asked, is it going to be civil war, or is it just us working through these growing pains? And it could go either way, but I also feel like it's, what are we doing right now to kind of help keep it from turning into a civil war, per se? And it is difficult to be open and speak with folks who have these ideas that are just so detrimental to groups of people, right? To trans folks, immigrant communities.
It could be deadly.
Yeah, it could be very
Yeah.
deadly, very deadly.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, and Dahlia's had a lot of personal connection in your own family to what's going on with immigration and ICE.
Yeah, and I think now, to kind of like to share a bit, it was my niece's grandmother who was deported after being here for 20 plus years, a preacher's wife type
Recently?
of thing. Yeah, and it was in June. And the more that people are realizing that it is not the criminals, right? Like people, I feel like are starting to
No.
realize that it's not just the criminals and it's impacting them and their daily life and people in their own community.
And it's
So-
going to impact the economy. I'm sure that person had a job that she was contributing to.
Childcare. She was giving
Yeah.
she was at like a daycare. So,
Yeah.
the kids in that group in her immediate circle. Now the parents are like,
Mother of 5, and they dumped her off in the middle of nowhere at the border with absolutely no resources and no, they didn't take them somewhere. They just dumped them out in the middle of nowhere.
yeah.
Yeah. And then you had a family member that accidentally got picked up and they just dumped him off in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere. It was an accident. So they're just, it's combing everybody and then dumping somebody once they realize they made a
It's a
mistake.
police state. It's a police state.
It's really upsetting. And so, switching gears, I wanted to ask you what, if anything, I know reading your book, I didn't feel surprised necessarily, but for any of our listeners, what, in this process of writing your book, what did you find surprised you the most?
Well, the level of conspiracy was really surprising to me. Among people I know and love, the woman, my dear friend since kindergarten who thinks children are identifying as cats and bringing litter boxes to school, who thinks George Floyd wasn't murdered by Derek Chauvin, and she's black and doesn't like Black Lives Matter, and she hates the media. And when I said, I'm the media too, she would say, well, I love you. And then I would explain what it's like to write a piece for the New York Times and have it to go through all this editing and then for have them to hand it to a really smart fact checker who would spend as many as 2 or 3 days fact checking the facts in this one particular piece I'm thinking of. And she got mad and said, well, who fact checks the fact checkers? And at some point, facts are facts. The truth is the truth.
Right.
And just because you consume news that spews hate and mistruths, I'm supposed to respect that you have these opinions, but they're not based on anything true. And she was actually at the event on Sunday and sent me a very upset text later as she looked into the book and felt that I had thrown her under the bus, even though I had interviewed her on the record, recording, taking notes, and just felt like it was very unkind of me to expose these conspiracy views she had. And I'm sure I'll hear that from some other people I interviewed too.
But isn't that kind of interesting that she's upset about you just saying what she believes in?
Yeah, she didn't say I got anything wrong, but she felt like she wasn't expecting to see it in a national book. But that's what I write. Books that go out in the nation and articles that appear in the nation. And so I don't, maybe I could have done a better job explaining what I was doing. But I mean, we met 3 or 4 times. We went on a trip together once with another friend. And I mean, she did my mom's funeral. We're very close, but I don't know that this is patch-upable. I think she feels betrayed, and that makes me sad.
That's really, that feels, because it's like that's definitely none of that was the intention, right? Like we're here to share the stories and understand kind of like different perspectives. So. Yeah, I'm
Right.
sorry that's happened.
Oh, thank you. The other big shocking thing was just attendance, both attendance in the schools, kids not showing up for school. Of course, soared during COVID, but still is a big issue. And so every time I would come home for a week, I would spend a day shadowing the attendance and / truancy officer. And that was super eye-opening and shocking. Just the amount of trauma she has to deal with. I mean, she's been assaulted. She's seen the aftermath of sexual abuse and had to have children removed. She's just sees parents using this homeschool in Ohio, which now has basically no regulation around it. Anybody can do that, even if it's just somebody who wants to get out of being charged for truancy, and pretend that they're homeschooling. And I'm not saying everybody does that who homeschools, but it's now an unintended consequence of that lack of regulation. And to see that playing out, at the same time you see attendance issues in my hometown, in the workplace playing out. I went to a job recruiting fair that was held in the big fairground barn, and I just went around talking to all the employers. None of them haven't had enough employees. They all had openings they couldn't fill. They were trying to recruit straight out of high school. Mm-hmm. And they were just saying people weren't workforce ready. And when you drill down, it was they don't know how to show up every day. The first question would be, well, how many days can I miss in the first 6 months? and the manager goes, the answer is 0. Like, you don't want to start, like, that shouldn't be the question you ask in the interview. Yeah. How many days can I miss? And so I started seeing like this, just the same people who weren't sending their kids to school also weren't showing up for work. And it was an aftermath of a lot of the mental health crisis and addiction crisis.
Mm-hmm. And Dahlia, now you come full circle as to why they encouraged immigrants to come from Florida to Ohio to fill these jobs that are largely unfilled. So that Absolutely. Is how the influx of Haitians was. They were coming from down Immokalee, down south of us there in Tampa. And so I was so glad that you included education. I was surprised to see, I wasn't expecting it, and I felt like it was so much of your talk. And I was an educator for a long time. I'm in higher ed now for the past 3 years, and I was an administrator. And I taught in a Title I school down in Florida as well. And I've taught private, I've taught like both ends of the spectrum, but it really doesn't, it spans all, even in the private school, what you talk about, the trauma of everything. And I do think so much of it does come back to education and what's going on in our schools and lack of funding. When you were talking about homeschooling, it is probably one of my biggest red flags right now that we have in education is that anybody can homeschool essentially. And in the United States, we have absolutely no regulation. We require teachers to have a certification, a 4-year degree, professional development, probably even a master's, even here in Ohio, but anybody can homeschool. And it's scary. It's scary to me. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine not wanting to go to school when I was young. I just school was my everything. It was where I felt most myself, most appreciated. And for these traumatized kids, they have to have that. And to lose faith in the institution of public schools is really a bright line we don't want to cross.
And that was kind of a reason we fled Florida, was because things had gotten so crazy there. He was teaching AP Human or AP Gender
Human Geography.
Not Human Geography. How can I? It's the psychology. Sorry,
Okay.
He did teach Human Geography too. Sorry.
Yeah, my husband also taught that. Yeah. Yeah.
And but his last year there, they cut gender and sexuality out of the curriculum. The Florida Department of Education cut it. They also demanded that you, as a teacher, if somebody went by different pronouns and you found out, you had to tell on them. You had to alert the parents. We had to have a kind of like a come to God talk of, okay, if you he said, I can't do that. I could get fired. And we said, that's fine. If it is, so be it, but we kept having to have these so that was a part of the reason that we left, but it is scary. And I am concerned about public education, and it's trickled down from higher education now to even public education. So,
question here: where does the mistrust come from education? Like now with the folks who are either wanting to homeschool, and obviously everybody does it for different reasons. I can acknowledge that. School may not feel like the safest place for some students, what have you. But overall, from what I'm hearing you say is there's been a lack of trust in the public school.
Mm-hmm. There's been
where does that
trust
stem from?
in America was at its peak the year I was born in 1964, and if you look at a chart, it just goes down, down, down every single year, and even under Reagan, when they first made major cuts to education, he had this education secretary, William Bennett, who said Pell Grants and just this whole notion of higher ed being a portal to upward mobility for poor kids he called it sociological flimflammery. And then you saw Clinton sort of adopting that same skill set, or those same talking points to be more centrist to get elected. And his big thing was the Hope Scholarship, which was really just tax credits that wouldn't necessarily. It wasn't grants. It basically was another step toward privatizing it to student loans instead of grants. And that's not going to help the poorest of kids. It was really just a way to help middle class, which is good. But why do we cut out this opportunity for kids like me and Silas? Right. And then I think the right-wing Christian nationalist movement has just been on top of this from the get-go. Mm-hmm. They have this group, ALEC, I forget what it stands for, but it's Koch brothers supported lobbyist group that helps different state legislatures write laws to support charter schools and public funding of private schools. And, there's a great documentary called God and Country that's based on, Rob Reiner produced it, but it's based on the work of Catherine B. Stewart, whose book really details how they've been doing that since going back to the moral majority in the 1980s, of which my sister...
You said God and Country? Is that the title of it?
God and Country, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's the name of the documentary. Her book has a slightly different title, I think. But it's Catherine B. Stewart, Stewart. And, I mention it in here because I always try to weave in history in all of my books.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to check that documentary out. Definitely be checking out your book, Beth. I know it's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's out.
It's out.
It
Y'all,
is
everybody,
out,
all the
yes.
listeners, get yourself.
I've been obnoxiously plugging it, I promise, the last couple of days, just because if you live around here, it's kind of, I was cringing some of the time, and, really into, my grandparents lived up by Tremont City, and they used to go to the airport in Urbana to eat at the cafeteria and use your story there. And it just kind of hit me like a gut punch, just all of it. So relevant to anyone, especially in this area, but everything going on in the United States. Absolutely. Yeah. And so before we end, I just wanted to ask you, and I know you've talked about specifically kind of what you do, but just to reiterate, the whole point of essentially our podcast, or what we're working on is, what tool in your toolbox do you offer to, quote unquote, this is called Navigate the Now. And so what is your word of advice for anybody maybe looking? And sometimes it's even something we have to remind ourselves every day.
Well, I think I mentioned it before, but it really, I was at this Bridging the Divide conference, and I met this Grammy award-winning Chicago rapper named Rhymefest. I think his real name is Shay Smith, and he's an activist, and he just got elected to Chicago School Board. And he was talking about, he's black, he was talking about, from Chicago, he was talking about this unusual friendship he has with these white guys on a ranch in Wyoming, and they visit each other a couple times a year. But the white guys don't want to come to Chicago because they perceive it as just like crime city, right? And he will like needle them, like, nudge them jokingly with, like, I'm from Chicago, it's fine, come, I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
But he said basically when people don't have experience with the other, or don't have, like my brother not knowing a non-binary person, or my friends, we need to extend grace to all points of view, because I think when that happened between me and my brother, it really did lead to some healing. It didn't necessarily work with my sister, who I feel like is so far culturally from me in so many ways. But we did come to a point where we can at least see each other. I mean, she came to the event on Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh, your sister
Yeah.
went?
Yes.
And your brother.
All
I know
my-
Allie told me your brother.
All my siblings
Yeah.
were there. And so I think just listening, not going 0 to 60 like I did with my sister in the case of that interview that I write about in the book. After she said, started quoting Leviticus about my kids. And then later she said, well, we were talking about Max. I said, well, you remember even when he was a little boy, he loved Wizard of Oz, and he would wear red ruby slippers, and had me make a cape, and he had this really wide open preschool teacher, and she's like, of course he can wear his red ruby slippers and a cape to school. And then, Cookie said, yeah, I do remember that. And I said, that's just who he was. That's how he came out. There wasn't anything we did. We didn't say, here, you can only wear red ruby slippers.
Right.
She said, and then she said, and I thought this was really a little crack of empathy. She said, did he get made fun of? And I said, not in preschool, but in kindergarten, he realized that if he acted that way, he would. And so then he became kind of a anxious person because he had to hide who he was. And, I know some people just find that anathema. I told that story on Fresh Air the other day, and one of the commenters said, what mom in her right mind would let a 4-year-old wear red ruby slippers and a cape to school? And I'm like, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And, but one of the things I could have said to Cookie is like, I did the best I could. What would you have done as the mother of a queer child? And I'm pretty sure I know what she would say, but just trying to create like vulnerability, and that allows them to sort of begin to try to put themselves in someone else's shoes. It does feel like the left is doing most of the work here, I will say. Yeah. I mean, are they studying how to talk across the divide? I'm not sure. But that whole thing about practicing grace really was an eye-opening thing to hear from Rhymefest, and how it had worked with him and his country buddies in Wyoming.
Well, we're going to add that to the toolbox, and that's going to be grace. And I like that a lot. And that speaks. Yeah. We have to have grace with each other and with ourselves too, right?
Yeah, so you said that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well,
I feel like we are kind of doing all the work right now. I totally agree. It's like just doing all the heavy lifting. But I wanted to acknowledge that you're sharing this as an extremely vulnerable process as well. All of your personal relationships, all of this, that takes a lot of courage. That
yes, it really
I think a lot of people, we struggle to have even in our own daily personal life. And so for you to do it in this way, is inspiring.
Yeah.
There's a little, and I'll just read this. In the last chapter, the election has just happened, and before the election, there's this outburst that happens at the county fair that I write about, where the Ohio gun owners come in and they actually win their case, and now people are allowed to open carry at the county fair. But and so I started following that group, and it was all about ammoing up for the end times, and it was sort of their manifesto that they would post. So I wrote my own manifesto at the end in response to theirs. I said, with a nod to Ohio gun owners, may I suggest that we instead touch grass, take a walk with a friend, buy diapers for a nonprofit dedicated to serving low-wage moms, help mutual aid groups led by people in struggle. Where it is safe to do so, try to mend frayed connections. Now, notice I said where it is safe to do so. It's not always safe.
Right.
By practicing grace, in the words of Barbara Kingsolver, love stays alive if you tend it like a flame. Support local news that's fact-based. Run for local office and or support candidates who are trying to change things for the better for the most people. Repeat. I mean, that's kind of where I landed. So I've started becoming more of an activist in my own community.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
That was super special.
Aw, love you guys.
Oh my
Love you
gosh.
guys. Thanks so much for having me
you.
on. I've got to go get ready
Yes.
for my event now.
Yes,
But this was beautiful.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Yes.
you take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Beth. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, that was such a great conversation with Beth Macy. Super appreciative of her time.
Yes. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you all the listeners. If you reached all the way to the end, cannot thank you enough for spending your time listening to us, chatting away. Hopefully you've taken a lot of the great gems. I know we didn't specifically ask her, but we had time was a crunch, but we'll add where you can find her Instagram.
Yes.
And all
It's pretty easy to find Beth Macy.
Yeah. And follow us, like, subscribe, share with a friend,
Oh.
That's all I got.
Yeah, we are at Navigate the Now on Instagram and Navigate the Now at Gmail and on all platforms where you listen to podcasts. Thank you.
Stay blessed.